I keep thinking back to the moment I decided to hand everything over, not money first, but trust that came before anything else. I told myself it was the right thing. I told myself family looks after its own. I said those words like they were facts. Not hopes. I won't lie, there was relief in letting go, a kind of tired relief. I was worn down from holding everything together for so long. I thought this was what resting looked like. I thought I had earned that. Instead, I feel a quiet shame settle in me now, not loud, not sharp, just steady and constant, like something I carry without speaking about. I should have known better. There were signs even then, small pauses, small hesitations, little moments that didn't quite land right. I brushed them aside without much thought. I remember the weight in my chest when I said yes, that heaviness that asked me to slow down. I ignored it. I smiled and kept my head down. I didn't want to be difficult. I didn't want to kick up a fuss. I thought love would cover the cracks. I was wrong. What mattered most to me was never the house or the savings or the paperwork. Those things come and go. What mattered was dignity. The quiet feeling that my life still belonged to me, that I was trusted, that I was respected, that my voice still carried weight. I had worked for decades without complaint. I showed up every day. I raised children. I held a marriage together longer than I should have. I carried responsibility without being asked. I kept things going even when it cost me. I believed that counted for something. Handing responsibility to family felt like a natural step. I told myself it was sensible, that I was being practical, that this was how families supported each other, but underneath that was a deeper need I rarely admitted. I wanted to feel safe. I wanted to feel held without having to explain myself. I wanted to know I would not be alone if things went wrong. I wanted to believe my place in the family was secure, that I was still valued, that I was not slowly becoming a burden waiting to happen. There was so much at risk, even if I never said it out loud. My independence, my sense of self, my right to decide. I could feel something shifting early on, not dramatically, just enough to notice small changes in tone, pauses, where there used to be ease, decisions being discussed without me fully involved. Nothing I could point to clearly, just a sense that the ground was moving under my feet. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself not to be ungrateful. Still, something had gone wrong. It started quietly, almost kindly, a suggestion made gently. It would be easier if one person handled things just for now, just to take the pressure off. I remember nodding before I fully thought it through. I remember feeling slightly foolish for hesitating at all. The words, "It's for your own good," were said softly, with concern, with reassurance. I trusted them. At first, nothing seemed different. I still paid my bills, still cooked my meals, still lived my days much the same. Life carried on in familiar ways. Then small things began to change. Letters stopped arriving on the table. They were taken away unopened. I was told it was all in hand. I didn't question it. I didn't want to look suspicious. Phone calls happened in other rooms. Voices lowered when I entered. When I walked in, the conversation stopped. I noticed it. I pretended not to. I kept my head down. I didn't want to seem paranoid. There were moments when decisions were announced, rather than discussed. A repair, arranged an account, moved a form, signed on my behalf. Each time it was framed as helpful, as efficient. I was told it was easier that way. I smiled and agreed. Inside, something tightened slightly, a quiet resistance. I didn't voice. I told myself this was what support looked like. I told myself not to make trouble. Over time, the balance shifted without me noticing at first. I found myself asking permission without realizing, "Can I do this? Is that all right?" It crept in slowly. So slowly I barely recognized it. I began to doubt my own instincts. When I raised a concern, it was met with reassurance that felt thin. "You worry too much. Leave it to us. We know what's best." Those words stayed with me. They settled somewhere deep. I began to feel like a guest in my own life still. I said nothing. I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I didn't want to be a problem. I noticed money conversations happening without me, figures mentioned in passing that didn't quite add up. When I asked, I was told not to fret. It was complicated. I wouldn't understand. That stung more than I expected. I had managed finances my whole adult life. Now I was being gently sidelined. There were silences that felt loaded, meals eaten quickly, eyes avoiding mine, a sense of impatience when I asked questions. I started to apologize for asking it all. I felt myself shrinking. I told myself families go through phases, that stress makes people short, that I was reading too much into things. I waited for things to settle. They did not. Instead, the distance grew quietly. I realized I was no longer included in plans. Things were decided, and then explained, sometimes not even that. I found out after the fact. I remember standing in the kitchen one afternoon holding a piece of post that should have come to me, my name printed clearly, already opened. I felt a flush of heat, a mix of embarrassment and anger. I said nothing. I folded it away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake thinking of all the moments I had ignored, all the times I had chosen peace over honesty. I wondered when exactly I had lost my place, Conversations became careful, polite, surface level. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in my own home. Any pushback was met with sighs, with looks exchanged over my head. I began to doubt myself deeply. Maybe I was being difficult, maybe this was normal. I watched myself retreat. I stopped asking, I stopped offering opinions, I kept things light to avoid tension. Inside, I felt a growing unease that never fully left. There were days when I felt invisible, other days when I felt watched. Neither felt right. I noticed a change in how I was spoken to, simpler words. A softer tone, as if I were fragile, as if my judgment could not be trusted. That hurt more than anything else. I had never thought of myself that way. I began to feel like my life was being quietly managed out of my hands. Still, I stayed silent. I didn't want to blow things up. I didn't want to risk losing what little peace remained. I told myself this was temporary, that once things settled I would be brought back in. I waited. Weeks turned into months. Nothing changed. If anything, it became clearer. I was no longer central. I was something to be handled. The realization came in fragments, a comment here, a withheld detail there. I felt a sense of betrayal without a single dramatic moment. Just a slow dawning. I had trusted too easily. I had given away something I could not easily take back. Even then, I held on to hope. Hope that if I spoke up it would be fixed. Hope that this was a misunderstanding. I rehearsed conversations in my head. I never had them. I didn't want to be seen as ungrateful. I didn't want to be a burden. I swallowed my discomfort and carried on. That was my mistake. The turning point came without raised voices, without shouting. It came in a quiet room with paperwork spread out. I was told about a decision that had already been made, something significant, something that would shape my future. I listened. I waited for the moment where I would be asked what I thought. It never came. I felt my chest tighten. I asked a simple question: why was this not discussed with me? The answer was calm, almost gentle. It was better this way. You don't need the stress. We have handled it. In that moment, something broke. Not loudly, not dramatically, just cleanly. And finally, I realized I was no longer seen as capable or equal or entitled to my own life. I felt a deep, cold understanding settle in me. I had handed over my trust and it had been used to sideline me. I looked at the faces in the room, familiar, loved, distant. I saw then that my role had changed. I was no longer consulted, I was managed. That was when I realized I'd made a terrible mistake. The truth came out soon after, not all at once, but enough to leave no doubt. Decisions had been made for convenience, not mine. Information had been withheld to keep things smooth. For them, my finances had been moved in ways I had not fully agreed to legally, perhaps. Morally, it felt wrong. I felt a hollow shock settle in, not anger, just grief. I felt foolish, I felt old, I felt like I had let myself down. Confronting it did not bring relief, it brought discomfort, awkward conversations, defensiveness. I was told it was done out of love, that they were only trying to help, that I was overreacting. Those words cut deeply. I began to question my own memory, my own judgment. I felt isolated within my own family. The consequences were quiet but heavy. I lost confidence. I second-guessed every decision. I hesitated before speaking, afraid of being dismissed again. Relationships shifted in subtle ways. Trust thinned, warmth faded. I felt a sadness that sat with me daily. I mourned the closeness I thought we had. I mourned the version of myself who believed it would be different. There was no dramatic fallout, no shouting, no clear ending, just a slow acceptance that things had changed, that I would have to rebuild my sense of self carefully. I took small steps to regain control, asking questions, setting boundaries, taking responsibility back where I could. It was uncomfortable, it was met with resistance, still I persisted quietly. I learned how easily love and control can blur, how good intentions do not always protect dignity. I live with the consequences now. I carry them with me every day. They have changed how I see family, how I see myself. I am more cautious, more guarded. I wish it had been different. I wish I had trusted my instincts earlier. I am learning to forgive myself. That is the hardest part. Looking back, I see how slowly it happened, how reasonable it all sounded at the time, how easily care turned into control. I understand now that wanting peace can cost you your voice, that love does not excuse exclusion. I sit with the weight of it. I do not rage against it, I simply acknowledge it. Life goes on quieter, now more careful, more deliberate. I still value family. I still believe in connection, but I hold myself closer. I listen to that inner hesitation now. I wonder sometimes how many others have felt this. How many have handed over too much out of love? If I had spoken sooner, would it have changed anything? What would you have done in my place? After that I moved more slowly through my days. I noticed myself thinking before every sentence, weighing every word, wondering how it would be received. I had never lived like that before. I had always spoken plainly. Now I measured myself. I softened my tone. I explained myself too much. I felt the need to justify simple choices. That change unsettled me more than anything else. I began to see how deeply it had seeped in. Even when I was alone, I questioned myself, should I do this? Is that sensible? What would they think? It startled me to realize how much space they still occupied in my head. Even when no one was there, that was a quiet loss. I did not expect. I tried to talk about how I felt, not all at once, just in small, careful ways. Each time the response was similar: confusion, defensiveness, a gentle dismissal. I was told I was misremembering, that things had always been this way, that I was reading too much into it. I nodded, I backed off, but something inside me stayed firm, a small, steady voice that said, no, this is not how it was. I stopped sharing certain things, not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. I learned which parts of myself were safe to keep private. I noticed how conversations felt easier when I stayed surface level, whether television, small talk, anything that did not touch the truth. It made the distance clearer, but it also made it bearable. There were moments of sadness that caught me off guard, seeing old photos, remembering laughter that once felt effortless. I grieved quietly, not just for what had happened, but for what I believed family meant. I realized how much I had invested in that idea, how much of myself I had wrapped around it. Trust, once cracked, does not shatter loudly. It thins, it fades, it becomes something you hold at arm's length. I still loved them, that never disappeared. But love no longer felt safe enough to be careless with. I learned to love with boundaries, even when it felt unnatural. Some days I felt strong, clear, grounded. Other days I felt tired, old in a way I had never felt before, not physically but emotionally. As if something essential had been worn down. I let myself feel that without judgment. I did not rush to fix it. Slowly, I began to reclaim small things, making decisions without explanation, handling simple matters myself, sitting with my discomfort instead of avoiding it. Each step felt both frightening and necessary. I did not announce it, I just did it. What surprised me most was how quiet this kind of hurt is. There is no obvious villain, no single moment to point to, just a gradual erosion that makes it harder to explain. Even to yourself. I live differently now, more aware, more protective of my inner world. I still believe in family, but I no longer believe that love automatically means safety. I listen to my instincts now, even when they whisper, especially then. Sometimes I still think about that first moment, the relief, the hope, the trust. I do not shame myself for it anymore. I understand why I did it. I needed rest, I needed reassurance, I needed to believe I was held. If I could speak to that version of myself, I would not warn her harshly, I would not frighten her, I would simply tell her to pause, to listen, to stay present in her own life. I am still here, still whole, just changed, and I carry this quietly with me now. When I look back, I try not to judge myself too harshly. That took time. At first, all I could see were my mistakes, the moments I stayed quiet, the chances I let slip, but slowly I began to understand the woman I was then. She was tired, she was hopeful, she wanted to believe that the people she loved would hold her gently. There is no shame in that. I still feel a sadness when I think about how things shifted, not sharp, just present, like a low ache that never fully leaves. I accept it now, instead of fighting it. Some losses are not meant to be fixed, only carried. I have learned that dignity is fragile, it can be taken without anyone raising their voice, it can disappear behind good intentions and calm explanations. I did not lose it all at once, I lost it inch by inch. And that is why it took so long to notice. My world is smaller now, but it is clearer. I choose what I share. I choose where I place my trust. I no longer apologize for wanting to understand my own life. I no longer explain myself to be comfortable for others. There are days when I still wish it had turned out differently, when I imagine how it might have felt to be protected instead of managed. Those thoughts pass, I let them go without bitterness. Holding on to anger would take more than it would give. What stays with me most is this quiet awareness that love does not cancel the need for respect. That silence does not always mean peace, and that listening to yourself is not selfish, it is necessary. I am still learning, still adjusting, still finding my footing again. But I feel more present in my own life than I did before. That matters. I carry this story gently, not to accuse, not to warn loudly, just to acknowledge what happened and to honor the part of me that survived it. What would you have done in my place?